So,
I've been drinking so
welcome
much water today.
to a second episode of Recall Japan. My name is Kevin. I'm here with the lovely Josh, my co-host, my amazing co-host, who you might see on Team Liquid Academy streams. Be sure to watch that live at, Team Liquid, twitch.tv/Team Liquid. Is that right?
Yeah, it's tomorrow,
Oh,
3
okay.
p.m.
Tomorrow, 3
I'll be
p.m.
watching it, shoot.
Okay. I'll keep an eye out for that whenever I can see it.
If you guys are awake, it's pretty early for people in Japan.
That's true.
That's
3
not a
p.m.
terrible time.
No, that's
I got
pretty
this.
early, right, for Japan?
Yeah, so that'd be like 7 a.m.
Yeah.
I know, that's way earlier than I wake up most of the time.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Anyway,
So
we gotta
bad for
introduce
me.
our special guest
Yes,
here. You said
so
you had a
here-
spiel ready to go.
we have the great and amazing special guest. We have Maplestreet. You might know him from such great teams as Velocity, Teammate, Renegades, and of course my favorite team, V3. But now he's on a much better team, doing much better with such great stars on Sengoku Gaming. How are you doing, Maple?
Well, I'm not entirely sure that's 100% accurate because
I mean, they just lost this
recently
last week.
lose.
That's true.
Yeah,
You're right. I guess we should call it a not
but
so
it's
great
a
team.
long-term plan.
Okay.
We'll get better. I'm doing good though.
Okay.
Happy to be here
So
with my good friend Kevin.
you are the unofficial coach of the split last season. So how does that make you
Yeah.
feel? Do you think you
Well, it's
deserve
real-
it? Real question. Do you think you are the coach of the split last season?
No, Kazu did great. You know, he won every game basically.
Well, besides the one game to you.
But, yeah. But we didn't really make playoffs, which is kind of the goal of every team, I would say. Because either you make playoffs, or you're just one of the other 5 teams that no one cares about too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I don't know.
I feel like the reason I was willing to extend it to you last split was because you look at the other teams. You look at the 4 teams that could have done it. There's like DFM, USG, CGA, and then Sengoku Gaming, and all the other teams on the face of it, they had a lot more star power to work with, and so you're kind of expecting them to be the top 3. But the fact that you were able to do it with a lot of relatively small players and unknowns coming into the scene, and still manage to take a game off of every single one of them, I thought was very impressive. So.
Yeah, well, we did get the chance to choose the players. We were a bit rushed in a way, and we're a bit lucky to get the players that I think were really good. Because coming in to late last year, it was a franchising system where we had to apply and we had to quickly just grab players, and then we made an announcement. But Raina and Taka were players I really, really wanted because I knew Raina had really good communication skills, and everyone I talked to said Taka was a really good teammate and generally was like a really good person to be around. And if you can just build off of a bit of communication and some good attitudes, I think you can make a really strong team.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That's a really good. I mean, that should be the team's plans for long-term League of Legends teams. You shouldn't try to be getting the best players in every position like right off the bat. I like your building system. I really respect teams that try to build new players so they can continue on in the long run. But okay, that's a good answer.
Yeah.
That's a very good answer.
Very
happy.
respectful.
Yeah.
Well, Taka isn't like super new. He's been trying over and over, but
Mhm.
he also
He's
has
never really had the chance.
English skills, which might have been a bit of a bias for me. But no, I actually genuinely believe that of all the options we had for Japanese mids, he was probably the best one.
All right.
Well, there you go.
I have a really quick question I want to ask you. It's mostly about playoffs, and Josh, you can answer if you want. So, in other regions around the world, there's mostly like playoffs is, I think in any sport, playoffs is the most exciting part. But in Japan, only 3 out of the 8 teams get to go to playoffs, and it's just semifinals and then finals, so just 2 playoff matches. So, do you think Japan should expand to like 6 or 4 teams to have that better like bracket system and make playoffs more of an event instead of just 2 relatively small matches or short matches?
Definitely. Like, the current system seems to favor the top seed pretty heavily. I really like the system the LEC used last
Mhm.
split for their playoffs. It gave a lot of teams different chances of making it to finals and then competing. And even though Origin got beat down twice in a row, uh, we managed to get the two best teams like fairly guaranteed into that final. So it not only had more teams, it also had the best teams guaranteed, and I think it was a lot more exciting. In Japan, with only three teams, the first seed just goes straight to the finals and watches the semifinals. And I think that like 2 or 3 week gap is a really big advantage for them, and it makes it really difficult for teams to upset the first place team.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. I think with when you have that big gap, because playoffs are very often on a new patch that people haven't played on before, and the fact that they get to hide strategies so effectively while getting to see the other team strategies, I agree is a really big advantage. I'd like to see an expansion to at least a fourth team, so that the first seeded team at least has to play a best of three, so you can see what they're doing on the patch. Because without that, it's just as you said, we've been seeing. I think the last time we had more than a game three in LJL finals was in 2018 spring, I think, when it was USG
I
versus
think it was
no
USC
Rampage
DFM.
DFM, something like
Summer
that.
we
Yeah,
also had USG versus DFM in the finals. 2018
Uh,
spring, wasn't that?
wasn't
I'm
it? I
pretty
think it
sure.
was Rampage
oh,
or
Yeah,
one of
something.
them
Pentagram
was
was
like a
back there.
3-0 from
Pentagram
Rampage and
won
DFM or something. Yeah,
3-0
Pentagram.
against DFM in
Mhm.
the finals
Uh,
in
that was
spring,
a
and then
shocker.
summer USG was able to beat Rampage, but USG lost to
Yeah, that's right.
Detonation 3-1.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Oh, okay,
uh,
yeah.
I'm not a
It's
very big fan of the
usually just not
gauntlet
very close.
format,
Yeah.
like the one that LCK uses as well. Like I don't really like it. After watching it many times, I kind of don't really like it. I think my favorite format so far is LEC. How there's like kind of a double elimination, but not really. But the first and second place team gets to play each other, and then if the second place team really is that good, they can face again in the finals, and that gives them like a chance to redeem themselves or get crushed again, like we saw this spring in Europe. But I think LJL needs to change their playoff format. I think only three teams making it to playoffs is it's really boring because regular season games aren't as fun as playoff games. Like that's where everyone comes to watch because it's a best of five. Supposedly the best teams in that region are competing for the championship title. So I don't know. I don't care too much about best of one series. Like people lose them, people win them. Like, but best of five, that's where I care the most about. So yeah, I just want Japan to change their playoff format.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few issues. One is they like rent out a certain building
Hmm.
and only have a certain amount of time. So I would like there to be a more permanent fixture for where LJO is held. And if they can manage to do that, then for sure we can definitely get like maybe 10 hours of just LJL in a row of playoff games. I think that would be really good.
Yeah, that would be cool. Okay,
Yeah.
I guess.
But you talked a little bit about the best of ones and how there's always upsets. Do you guys
Mhm.
want to talk about this last week? 'Cause I
Yeah.
think there were a couple of pretty big upsets that went on, especially after the power
Mhm.
rankings that Kevin and I put out.
So this weekend
Let's
was
start
very
with one.
surprising. I was very
Yeah.
shocked at the results. Like I didn't expect it to go that hard, but I guess we'll talk about Maple's team first, and then get them out of the way. We could talk about the other teams. So let's talk about Sengoku because that's a team that's what played really differently than to how I expected. Like I wasn't sure what to expect, but I wasn't expecting that. Like okay,
Well,
my first issue, and I know he's a rookie, but the top laner, like I don't want to like shit on him because he's only been playing for 2 games competitively, but I was shocked that he was worse than they are. Like I was surprised that you were able to get a top laner worse than him, but it's only been 2 games, so I don't really want to go that hard on him.
I
But
mean, it's
he
also
was
you have to remember he was playing against Winyan and Paz, who are
yeah.
they're not the super top, but they are definitely above average for Japanese top. So
Hmm.
um, yeah, I'll let Maple talk in just a moment. But
I,
I thought my biggest thought was it looks like Donshu is taking up a lot of drafting resources because they were first. You guys first picked Nico both times on both blue and red side without any other solo laners banned from the other team.
Mm. Oh, well, the
It's
drafts
really
were
early,
interesting,
right?
yes, but uh, the Rhea versus Donchu thing, well, yeah, there's like a certain issue behind the scenes, and it's not like with attitude or anything, it's something else. But I do think Donchu can definitely grow and improve a lot, and uh, he's a very nice person. He did
Always
get
good.
he did get pooped on a little bit, but I don't know. I didn't like the we didn't prepare like perfectly for the matchup. For example, uh, we let Z3 take the Aatrox and we took the Nico. And the general idea in most regions right now is that the Nico can bully the Aatrox, but it's generally AD Nico, and also you need the jungler to be around the Nico lane, around levels 2 and 3, just so the Nico can freely push in and harass as much as she wants. And we may have done neither of that, so that was a bit of an issue. Uh, Nico's just a very flexible champion right now. Goes into top and mid, and generally has good win conditions. Like, even if the lane isn't perfect, you still have the ability to completely break a team fight in the mid late game. So, I don't think we're necessarily prioritizing him in the draft. It's just what we felt the meta was at the time.
Mm-hmm. That's
Okay.
fair. I mean, it was interesting. I thought it was surprising that Axis felt like they were putting up as much of a fight against Sengoku because I thought Sengoku was going to be looking very strong. And I just like a brief touching on how Axis plays. I noticed that they were a lot more willing to make plays around the map than they were in the spring split. Unfortunately, they were making a lot of plays at the wrong time, and almost every single time they were going for an objective, they ended up trading down. Like they get this turret, but they lose a turret, a kill, and a dragon, or they get the Rift Herald, but now they're going to be losing the mid lane turret and another kill off of it. Did you want to comment a little bit more on that game? Because I felt like you guys were doing a very good job of punishing every single time Axis was out of position.
Yeah, well, the Sengoku Axis game, like, we started off with a tremendous lead. I think we were up like 4 or 5 dragons, but we just did not uh, create the appropriate Baron pressure. Like, we just didn't close out the game because our team comp didn't have amazing engage, and but to close out the game, what we needed to do was vision control and sell on to make a really ballsy call. Like, hey, just rise out everyone over. Or, hey, Nico pushes in bottom and rotates towards mid. Instead, what we did was just constantly wave clear, and that's sort of an issue that comes with inexperience as 5 on how to like close out the game. Because Blank was like he was extremely fed. We had so many dragons. Oddgi was up so much on day 1. We should have been able to win that game really easily, but instead, like, we lost a team fight, we lost the Baron, and that's sort of after that happened was when everyone started communicating again and being like, "Oh wait, we can lose this. What is our game plan? What is our win condition?" And I think before that happened, people were just like not thinking about the plays that were necessary to win the game, and that was the issue in that game.
Okay.
Gotcha. Do you want to transition that a little bit into the game against V3?
I have one more question.
Oh,
So
sure.
it's about Donshu, right? I don't want to just like keep harping on this topic, but what do you think is like? What would you say is a good quality about him that people like us can hear about and get excited to keep seeing him play, and hopefully he can grow into?
Well, he's very new, and he didn't have an account on the Korean server, so we
Mhm.
actually couldn't like prep him up very well for the start of the season. But he's very young. I believe he's lived in China before, and he like actively watches a lot of Chinese VODs and whatnot.
Oh, okay.
So this is a player that I believe can actually become a super good top laner because he has English, Chinese, Japanese skills,
Oh, wow.
and
Okay.
he actively looks for like information on really strong regions, and he studies the game. So even though he's a complete rookie, I think he has really high potential just because of so many options of information and ability to seek out information. He can do all of that.
Okay. Okay, that's a good answer. I like that. Okay. Then I'll keep looking forward to Donshu improving. So, the next game I guess we'll talk about is V3 versus Sengoku Gaming. And that game was a real I don't know. I don't know
It
what
was
to
fun. I
say.
enjoyed watching.
Yeah, it was fun. If you're a V3 fan, it was fun. If you're a Sengoku fan, it would be more frustrating, I guess. Cause I don't know. Like I thought Blank did really well. Like I don't think. I mean, obviously it's hard to be like unbiased. This is probably a really biased statement, but I thought Blank played almost perfectly that game. I wasn't sure what else he could do because I mean, you have trouble in the top lane and like mid lane, and then Yutori Marashi was like popping off with this Sivir, just auto attacking, dealing a lot of damage. So I'm not too sure what Sengoku could have done that game.
Well, uh, we
I'm
had a
just
bad
like,
read
what am I
on
allowed
the
to say?
draft. We had a very bad read on the draft,
Mhm.
which is partially my fault. We picked a bunch of champions that seemed like their metagame, and then V3 just had the like absolute powerhouses of Aatrox, Silas, and Sivir.
Yeah.
And also Tom Kench like counters Skarner so hard.
Mhm.
So you have to think about which lanes can the Skarner even gank before level 6, and there's none of them. And after level 6, it's still really hard to gank Aatrox and Silas. So I don't think we gave the players a good shot at succeeding in the game with their champions. Like LeBlanc can't really kill Silas without having a very early successful gank.
Mhm.
And V3 played it really well. Their mid lane can push in all the time. Their top lane with a lead will just absolutely destroy us. And like I alluded to before, we didn't set up the proper jungle and top synergy for that game. So what happened was Nico got ganked early, and suddenly, as a team, our win conditions were very, very limited. We did have like a bit of kiting comp, we had a bit of catch as well, but it's very hard to kite with Nico, Xayah, Lux if there's an extremely fed Silas and Aatrox just running you down with Sivir. It
Mhm.
just their team comp was much stronger than ours, essentially.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Their team comp was really good, and I thought Vivid's Tom Kench was pretty. I don't know, like Tom Kench is
Yeah,
such
he
a
is
good
very, very good.
support, but I hate his mechanics so much. It's such an anti-fun champion. Like you think, oh, we got to pick, and then Tom Kench just says nope. He eats someone, just runs away.
Well,
So
he doesn't really run away anymore. He
that's
kind of
true,
just like
but
battles you and beats the crap out of you. Like Sona Tom Kench is really popular now,
hmm
and they nerfed Tom Kench's W, so he doesn't like run anymore. He
yeah,
kind of just gives them a Zonia's.
yeah,
You're just like you can't die for a few seconds. And now Tom Kench's other skills got buffed, so he's just a huge bruiser that just absolutely destroyed LGL this week in top lane, and is also
yeah.
really good in support.
Man, okay, I'm really sad I didn't call that out on stream last week. Because people have been playing Tom Kench top like in solo queue basically around the world, and I was
hmm
thinking this is a champion that Evie in particular continued playing well after the rest of the world stopped playing it. I wonder if he's gonna bring it out, and then he did, and I
Yeah,
think Maplestreet was the one who tweeted, it's like, "Thank you, Burning Core, for being the sacrifice, so that everybody else knows we have to ban this up against Evie."
yeah. I forgot. I can't believe we didn't talk about that because Evie signature champion is probably Tom Kench. Like everyone knows that Evi's Tom Kench top is like pretty disgusting. Now that it's OP in
Yeah,
the top lane, I guess he's just gonna pick it every game.
Evie is
Yeah.
a filthy Tom Kench player. Like he's very dishonorable because he
Mm.
goes into the All Stars 1v1s, and then you pick Tom Kench and the game's over. Like 99% of champions can't do anything
Is
against
that
Tom
someone you
Kench.
adore?
I guess so, but I'm kind of scared, you know.
You're just gonna leave it?
I'm not expecting anyone. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know. I'm just gonna leave it.
Okay, okay. That's fine.
If they rig again, you will get him. But
Okay.
No worries. Yeah.
I'm busy right now.
So,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on
Sure.
V3 now? I guess we can move on to V3. Unless if there's something you want to talk about for V3 versus Sengoku. I'm not sure if there's anything else to talk about.
I don't know.
I mean, you
V3
guys
in
could have already talked
general,
about it.
pretty good. I don't know. I thought they were
Yeah.
pretty decent.
Yeah, I thought they looked good. But, Baby and Ace still look like the weak link on V3.
I don't know. I had very, very low expectations for Baby, but I think he performed pretty well. It didn't seem like he had any key mistakes.
Yeah.
Ace did his job. He pushed in pretty well and had decent pressure. So
Mm-hmm.
Vivid
Mm.
was really good, and Mayashi was pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I think their bot lane is the standout of their team. Like,
Mm.
now they have a really competitive bot lane that can actually win lanes and win fights. So their team is like more has more options.
Okay, I'm gonna go
Uh-oh.
check the
Yeah,
door.
okay.
Convenient time.
Okay. Well, we'll keep talking about it. I mean,
Cool.
yeah, I didn't have any expectation for Baby because I wasn't sure, but he was serviceable. He wasn't
Yeah.
like amazing, but he wasn't like bad or anything like that.
Yeah. I don't know. I kind of want to transition to the big upset of the week, especially
wanna
based
go
on what we were looking at. You know, Crest Gaming Act against
Okay.
Detonation Focus Me was not at all what I think anybody was expecting. Everybody was looking at
Yeah.
DFM to come back and absolutely stomp, but Crest Gaming Act looked pretty good, and I'm gonna say hot take. I think Achamomo is actually probably a really good support. Right off of just the two games that we saw, he not only did super well on Yumi in both of them, but
Mhm.
one of them was against Utapon and Gang, which is probably the most lane dominant bot lane in the entire league. So seeing that Yuhi and Achamomo were able to do that against the best lane, I don't see anybody else who is likely to be able to do anything against them except maybe like Utori and Vivid, right? If they're already playing up with that,
Mhm.
oh, they're already playing up with that level of play. Who else can really take them down?
Yeah, that's true, but I mean, they did get a really good bot lane. Like, I think Yumi is really strong, and the fact that he got Yumi both games is kind of like worrying. Plus, especially against DFM, they got Sivir and Yumi, which I think is one of the strongest bot lanes in league right now. It's so safe, it's hard to gank. You have so much poke potential, you have so much sustain. You have really good engage with Sivir and Yumi ult. It's like, I don't know. I think you have to ban Sivir or like I guess Yumi. Like ban Yumi. Like you can't give Achamomi Yumi.
Yeah.
Like let's see
Well-
what he can do on other supports before we start saying he's really good. Because look, I can play
Yeah.
Yumi. It's not that hard as long as you know the basics. So, and he's combined with like Sivir. It's like I don't know. It's OP. There's not
Sure.
no other way. to say it.
Just gonna say, yeah, you're right, Nkureha. It is art. I misspoke. It's not Yuhi, but art and Achamomo. I just thought they looked really good, and he like so far he's putting out some pretty nuts numbers, right? He's third overall in experience at 15 in the entire league. And then fifth at goal difference on 15. Again, over 2 wins. So there is a little bit of confirmation bias here, but those are those are really impressive coming from a team that both Kevin and I put as I think number 5 or number 6 in the entire league.
Mhm.
Well, the really strong point of Crest Gaming has always been their team fighting.
Yeah.
I remember there was a game last season against USG in the regular season where they were down like 4 or 5 dragons, and they just had this absolutely perfect team fighting. And that's when I thought in my head, like, wow, Crest is actually an insane team. because it reminded me of like an LCK team beating down like a North American team. They had really clean team fights where, despite being down a significant margin, they managed to bring it all back. And this season of Crest Gaming seems to be more of the same, just really, really strong team fighting. And I agree that Achamomo being somewhat new to playing on stage, I don't think you should give him Yumi.
Hmm.
That's just my opinion.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I think that's his last Yumi game, because I don't know, I don't. He's never played support competitively, as far as I can tell. Maybe in the
I
past
thought we
before
determined that
LJL
he
was a
did
thing.
like in
Yeah,
2015 or something.
2015, 2014, like before LJL was a thing. Grendel played top and Achamo played support. So I guess that's why
Yeah.
they role swapped with each other. They're like, oh, I'd rather play top and you can play support. Which is like
Yeah.
weird.
I
What?
have no idea on that whole situation.
Yeah.
It's the power of friendship or just it's an actual good move, I can't tell.
I
Yeah, I mean,
mean,
I think it was
yeah.
interesting that they did that with Grendel too, because I thought he very much recognized that he is not going to be beating Evie in the top lane at all, and so they ended up having him play Sejuani, right,
Hmm.
up against whatever it was that Evie played, and he just
Rumble.
lost the lane yeah, Rumble, and he just lost the lane gracefully, and then now you have a Sejuani on your team,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that has
right?
to
I mean,
be
he's in a team fight.
I want to comment on that. That has to be the funniest flex pick of all time.
Sejuani.
Because, like, you show the Sejuani, and the natural thinking is, oh, that's going jungle. But it's like, oh, surprise, it's Skarner jungle who does essentially the same thing and is countered by very similar champions. So it wasn't exactly, like, the most useful double flex of all time,
Hmm.
but I just found that hilarious when I saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they have a really strong front line. And yeah, I don't know.
They just won through team fighting. I don't know how they do it. Like, their coach must be really good at just drilling in how to team fight,
Hmm.
or there
Mhm.
must be like perfect communication. It's like one of the two.
Because you look at the DFM composition where they had the Rumble Jarvan as the core for the team fight, and Silas, Ezreal, and the Karma, right? You just look at that and it has a pretty strong team fight, but Crest Gaming was able to win almost every single time that they had an engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were also using Ramune on DFM, which may
True.
have caused some issues, but I was not impressed with Evi's Rumble. I felt some of
Hmm.
his ults were a bit of a miss, and Ramune didn't seem to have like really good plays with Steel that game.
Yeah.
So it was a rough game for DFM.
I mean, they're both.
You think they're gonna
Their
start
bowling was
winning
so
again?
good.
Yes.
No,
Oh.
dude, week one they're done for.
You're done for. It's over.
Going just
It's over.
downhill.
So DFM's not winning LGL. Looks like Crest will win LGL this year, so I guess you don't have to watch the rest of the games. But I mean, quick point.
Hold on,
Like
hold on.
Yutapon, I think still did really well. Ramene's Silas, I didn't think it was that impressive, and I mean it was still a pretty close game. It came down to a Baron fight, and Achamomo wasted ult right before the fight, but I was like, oh, no Yumi ult, they're gonna lose, but they still managed to make a great pick and win the game. So I don't know. That nation without Saros looks
It was
pretty
the bait.
bad.
Yeah, I don't know. In this meta, I don't think you can flex two players in mid that well because it really feels like there's 5 or 6 champions that are picked almost every single game, and there are these picks that can be flexed both top and mid. And you don't really like. I know Seros can play Silas, so it didn't really seem like the swap of the players was necessary for this game, and I'm not sure why they didn't.
Well, the idea is that Ramune will eventually take over Saros' position, right? Like, they
Who
think that
knows?
Ramune
Seros
is a
could
better
play till he's
mid laner.
40.
2040, still playing. That would be a long time. I mean, he's been there with them for like 6 years already, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think since their inception. I think Saros was always there.
Mm.
Mhm.
So, I don't know. Yeah, dropping the game is kind of like worrying, seeing how they're playing against someone that's role swapping in two different positions. So I don't know. We could just blame Ramune and just move on and hope that the nation does better with Saros.
Well, it was just Chris playing really well,
Yeah,
would
I know
say,
it's not
but
Ramune's
Yeah.
fault, like entirely,
Luna
but
and
he didn't
Art
really
are
help.
just insanely good at team fights, I feel like. And the
Hmm.
team just helps support them really well.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Well, moving on a little bit. Unsold Stuff Gaming lost both their games over the weekend. One to Burning Core, and the second one to Crest Gaming Act. Do you guys have any big thoughts on those?
Um.
Jeez, I don't know. Burning Core, I was surprised with Burning Core. I felt they looked really, really good. And genuinely, it was the first time that I saw Once play, and I was thinking, wow, he's playing really well. Because honestly, for past few seasons, I've been a bit upset about the Wilder Once situation and Once being on the top teams all the time. But BC as a whole seemed to have made some good moves because they were quite competitive against DFM, and their game against USG, I felt like everyone on the team was performing their role pretty well.
Hmm.
I think they have a really interesting willingness to just kind of ignore what meta champions are because they played what was it, Lulu and Echo in the mid lane, right? Roki is
Oh
just
yeah.
willing to kind of play these more unusual champions, and I thought it made it really easy for especially their game against USG for them to just kind of wait the game out because you look at the composition that USG had drafted. You see this a lot, especially these days when 131 is so popular. There's not a lot of strong engage. They were relying on Tussle finding a flank on the Lee Sin, and trying to jump into Xin Zhao and Lulu is going to get you killed quite often. So I feel like they just kind of outdrafted Unsold Stuff Gaming and were able to just win as the game went later and later.
Yeah, there's another instance of giving over Aatrox and trying to Yumi counterpick it, but
Uh,
we fell for the same trap.
yeah.
I don't know. Burning Core, I
Well,
have
I
like
mean, Yumi
zero
was on
information on their
USG.
support,
Yeah.
and Yuhi, I had like very little info on. I do think Rayfarki is an actual really strong player, just because I know what his rank is in Korea. I think he's going to be really good. So
All right.
Figs might be looking pretty good for BC, and yeah, Once and Roki seem to have good synergy, and USG's problems. I don't know what their problems were. They still don't have a bot lane that will like hard carry the game.
Hmm.
Last season they relied heavily on Dasher to sometimes 1v9 a game, and then other times it'd be Oppamin having really, really strong team fights. And with this metagame, I don't think Dasher can 1v9 unless he starts picking up Akali, Aurelia every game. But I expect those champions to kind of be banned against him.
What do you think
Yeah.
about Tussle playing Lee Sin? Because I didn't think it
Mm,
looked that great. Like, I don't know. Like, Tussle tries to come off as like this crazy, really good jungler, but in my opinion, his greatest points is how he moves through the map and warding, giving vision control, and like ganking or counter jungling. But I don't
yeah,
think his Lee Sin was that great against the Burning Core.
I see Tussle as a player who's very, very intelligent and has really good pathing and could like absolutely destroy the other jungler if he just like gets a good matchup. And Xin Zhao against Lee Sin, I don't think the Lee Sin can ever fight the Xin Zhao. So maybe it was like a misread on what Once could play there.
Mm-hmm.
And Xin Zhao isn't very popular at the moment, so it was probably just an unexpected pick, I think, that really caught him off guard. And his Lee Sin didn't look amazing, but it was a tough matchup, I would say, for him.
Okay. What are
Yeah.
your
I don't
thoughts
know. I
But
on?
just felt like he
Uh-huh.
made a couple of uncharacteristic like mistakes. You tend to see him, as you kind of talked about, be a little bit more aggressive on the map in general, and this time he rather consistently went for more defensive options. And because of that, they just had a composition where they couldn't really do anything as the game went later. Because they did, they also had a pretty big lead fairly early on. going up against Burning Core, and it just didn't really matter. Or maybe I'm thinking of the wrong game. I mean, yeah, they were doing fairly well early on, but it just didn't matter.
Yeah, that was the
Yeah,
CGA game where they were up a lot. Dasher was on
yeah,
Aurelia, and Arumik like solo killed Grendel multiple times with Akali.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
So they were up a lot, and then bad things happened.
And then you get into the CGA team fighting, and they just lost two of them
Yeah.
really hard back to back, and the game was just completely over.
Yeah, I genuinely think their team fighting is probably like the best in the region, and maybe even like Korean level. Like it really feels like they have some of the cleanest team fights when they're just playing well as a team. It really reminds me of like all the times I cheered on NA at Worlds and we just got stomped in a team fight. Like the really best teams are the ones who can just absolutely come back with a major team fight every
Mhm.
single time. And I think CGA is one of them.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was surprised by the team fighting. Like, they didn't seem like they had any issues losing Nap. Like, they still look really good. They still look the same, like Crest Gaming, which I thought was kind of surprising. I was expecting a little bit more like iffiness, but I guess that was only like early game they lost a little bit of power. But mid to late game, they still look the same. They still look really strong. And if they can keep this up, maybe they can have a really good performance.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think, yeah, it's a pretty exciting season of LGL, I think, this time around. There's a lot of teams that can fight for playoffs now, with CJ, Burning Core, us, and DFM, and V3, maybe all actually competing instead of it just being sort of locked the top three teams before the last week even started. I think
Oh
this
yeah.
season, like, it might come down to the last few games instead.
You think Burning Core is gonna make top 3 in LGL already?
No, they have the potential. Like, I think their biggest problem last season was in the jungle, and well, I guess it's really early to make these bold statements.
But this is the
But
best time to
I
do
was
it. Like when you
feeling
get proven right
that
3 months
once was
from
doing
now,
pretty
and you're just
well.
like, yeah, I called
You
that.
make a hot take.
The whole last season, I was like staring at my computer. I'm always looking at the rankings of players and their solo queue accounts. I'm like, why is Wilder, who's Challenger 700 LP, not being played over this guy who's 100 LP Master tier? And I got really
Mm.
upset at that, and I kept complaining to my friends about it. Didn't change anything, but yeah.
Yeah, he's still not on a team.
Well,
He
he's
no,
on
he's on team and
Australian team now.
Australia.
Oh, he
Bombers?
is.
Someone
Okay.
saw his value. I do think he can become a really great player, but
Yeah, I think he's on the Bombers, right? Like one of the
I
top
believe so,
Australian
yeah.
teams.
Yeah,
So
Bombers was like
I'm happy.
replace one Korean with a different one. No,
Well,
I
he
think
got a good
Wilder
one.
has some English skills, so he can fit in.
There's only 2 more teams we haven't talked about, and I'm kind of interested in talking about one of them, but not so much the other, and that's RJ and Axis. Which one do you guys want to
Mhm.
talk about first?
Our good friends Axis, I guess we can put them to bed.
Okay, let's talk about
Well,
Axis Gaming first.
I mean, this season
I
they
think they
didn't
look
seem
better.
too bad, but
No,
they have
they
some
they look
really
better.
strange drafts sometimes.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know what the hell that Twisted Fate pick was. I don't
Yeah,
think it counters Renekton or Jace.
I have
And
no
No.
idea.
it was not that useful. And they also didn't do their research, because if you look on OPGG, check pro player accounts, you'll find Ninja down there, and you'll see that like he plays a lot of AD champions on his account. He's gonna bring out like Renekton, he's gonna bring out Jace, he's gonna bring out like Yasuo, Talon. Like this guy, for some odd reason, refuses to play AP mages on his solo queue account. So like picking Aurelia was huge trap, and they they struggled really heavily because their matchups were just not very good for them.
Mhm.
And last season they had one game against Sengoku where they had a Jax top lane, and their entire team comp had no wave clear. It was a win trade. I don't know what the hell it was. Like, it was possibly the worst draft of LGL. But I'm a person that analyzes all the drafts a lot and flames a lot of people. But yeah, Axis need to sometimes fix their draft a little. And I think this week against RJ, they had a really bad draft.
Hmm. I mean, the TF pick was kind of like suspicious against RJ. I don't really understand why. Like, he didn't really do anything with the pick. Like, if he was making like attempts using ulti, like, oh, I'm gonna go top or I'm gonna go bot and try to get bot lane rolling, but he just sat there and just did nothing and farmed and was pretty non-existent. I still think
Yeah.
Wyvern's a really good jungler though, especially on his Talia. He was
Mm.
wrecking people. Maybe not so much
That's
the
RJ,
next.
but
Actually, the next game, the one against V3, I think Wyvern still did really well. It was a really interesting pick.
yeah, Wyvern's always a pretty strong player. But a little bit more on Axis, I guess. They did swap out a few players, and their roster, I believe, like has decent potential now to fight other teams. Last season, like, uh, I followed their Korean accounts a little bit, and their ranking was like hovering really low, but now their ranking are fairly close in skill level.
Okay.
So it just depends on how they mesh as a team. And I think there's no language barrier on that team, that everyone on the team can speak Japanese.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't say they're completely hopeless,
No,
but
I wouldn't say
don't
that
take
either.
Aurelia against RJ, is my advice.
I'm a little interested at how much stock you put into players' solo queue accounts because I think a lot of other coaches don't necessarily care about it, or at least they claim that they don't care about it nearly as much. Is there something in particular you're finding?
That's a good question. Well, I would just say, like, in terms of players to replace, I would normally look through solo queue level if like they don't bring something extra to the team, like shot calling or a lot of communication. Uh, generally, generally I follow their champions a lot. Their absolute ranking doesn't mean too much because when you get on stage as opposed to a scrim, the games tend to be a lot more slow and more calculated because everyone's tracking the jungle really well. But in a scrim, generally you'll see like a challenger player absolutely demolish a diamond player because they're just playing really aggressive, and maybe the diamond player isn't like 100% focused on filling his role of not dying. But yeah, Axis last season was just I felt like they were losing their lanes way too hard, so it was almost impossible to do anything. And also, I didn't feel that Ison was a very strong jungle. He struggled a lot and made a lot of mistakes. So as a team, it felt like if you don't have individual skill, you can't win the lanes. And generally, team fighting is a skill that you acquire when you climb up higher in the ranking. And yeah, that's my that's my thoughts on the ranking of KR Solo
Okay.
queue.
Oh, fair enough.
I don't know. Like, I'm still not sold on Garyaru. I think if they kept Denton but got a Korean mid laner, that team would be so much better. But I don't know. I guess I'll give him this one last season. If he's still bad by the end of the season, he's still playing, then I'll make fun of him some more. But for
Yeah,
now,
the only advantage Axis has is they speak the same language,
mhm.
so hopefully that uh, communication is not an issue at all. And once they like figure out what's their win condition for each of their players and their playstyles, then maybe they can get it together and probably get more than 3 wins. I would say this season, I think they can get more than 3 wins.
I hope so. I mean, 3 wins isn't that hard to top. Like, I
Well,
don't. I think they can get
I'm
three
saying they're
wins.
improving. Is
Okay,
all.
okay, okay. Okay, I think we're done with all the teams. Unless if you want
Yeah,
to talk about RJ, we haven't really touched on them too much.
I'm I mean, I think my thoughts on Rascal Jester are pretty much the same as what they were last week. It's, if Cog and Wyvern pop off, they will beat everyone in the entire league. If they don't pop off, they don't. And I think it's really about that simple. Because you just look at the bottom half of the roster, like Ninja's fine. Um, Zeros and Alleycat are okay. But neither of them are good enough or bad enough to instantly win or lose the game. So, I mean, with Cog and Wyvern fighting over and over, we saw both sides of the coin this last week where they completely ran over Weenyan and Smile, and then they pretty much completely botched the game going up against V3 because they were so far down. They tried to bring out the Pantheon, and it just didn't pop off, and the game was just over. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess that shows a lot of character from RJ, that in both games they drafted a very deceptive sort of team comp, where they were trying to trick the opponent into thinking, oh, it's Talia Pantheon bottom. That's a little random, but I guess it's that. And then they also had like the Renekton double flex shenanigans and the Jace double flex shenanigans. So I think the coaching and the players are doing something pretty interesting. They're trying to fight the meta by sort of playing deceptively and drafting in that kind of way. The Pantheon experiment, though, it ran into Tom Kench, and
Yeah.
I don't know, V3. I guess they drafted pretty well because they weren't really sure what was top lane since they didn't have last pick. But they just said, we'll throw Tom Kench in there, and or maybe they had a good idea it was Pantheon top, I don't know, but they just threw the Tom Kench in there, and they ended up having like pretty good matchups in all lanes again. So
Yeah.
not bad drafting by them, V3.
Yeah, I agree. Like, but I like RJ's style. I like their mindset going into the game. They're pretty like proactive instead of just sitting there waiting to lose. They just, they make plays. Some of it works really well, some of it doesn't, and they look like they're just inting. But I prefer to watch that, like a team that wants to take control of the game and lose, rather than a team that just does nothing and then just loses. But
Yeah,
I think one of my friends described it as, you can lose like old KT where you just go for all these plays and it looks like it might be good, so you try it out anyway. Or you can lose like Jin Air, where you just sit there and it's like, nah, wait, we can't take this fight. We'll find a better one in 5 minutes. No, wait, we can't take this fight. We'll find a better one in 5 minutes. And then eventually you see that you're at a 60-minute game and you haven't taken a fight in the past 30 minutes.
Don't worry, we got the 800 CS power spike on Teddy.
Okay.
If only you could buy more item slots, right? I think that would make Jin Air the best team in the world.
The
Jin Air would be unstoppable.
People were selling items just to buy a ZZ route to put it down and buy back another item. That was ridiculous that the game went to that late of a game.
I can't imagine casting that kind of game, like trying to stay focused.
It's like, oh, that's so smart,
That
but
would be
why is this game going to
wrong.
7 items?
Why does he have that much gold? Yeah.
Okay. Let's look at the week
Yeah.
matchups for this Sunday, Japan time.
Oh man. Okay.
I mean, just
Let
looking
me
at
pull that
it.
up real quick.
So we have some interesting matchups, but mostly, I don't know. I guess Axis. Oh no, not Axis. Detonation versus V3. That would be a fun matchup, just to see
Yeah.
how the teams are. But-
See if they bounce back, what their
Yeah.
roster is going to be. There's a lot of pretty interesting games, I would say, towards the later half. The first 2 games maybe might be one-sided. I don't know if Axis will compete that well against USG and V3, but who knows? Maybe USG's tilted.
Yeah, I mean, USG's problem last season is that they're so inconsistent. So, who knows what's going to happen this season. Hopefully, Opperman can get back. If Opperman doesn't come back, I don't think they're going to do well. For some reason, this team looks so lost. Like, more lost than last season. Because last season, they had good moments and they looked really good. But they would lose games to, like, Axis and just start inting randomly. For some reason, like, oh, we have an advantage. Oh, we'll just start inting. Like, who cares? But I mean, this season they're just like, oh, we don't know what to do. We're just inting again. So,
Well,
yeah.
USG had a few games where Dasher like completely 1v9 the game. So he had like 2 or 3 Zoe games and one of the Jace games where his DPM was actually insane. His DPM was like over 800 or something.
Jeez.
His Jace went up to 1,162 DPM against Burning Core. Like, that guy is a super carry sometimes on Zoe and Jace. This season, the champions are a bit different, so
Yeah.
it might be a bit harder to hit that damage numbers, but he's an insane player, and if he gets the right champion, he will definitely carry. He had 52% of his team's damage that game. That's insane.
Whoa. Okay. Okay, that's crazy.
Yeah, okay, remember,
52%?
this is part of
Wow.
why I was like, yeah, Dasher, he's at least in contention for best player in the league. On a good day, he can definitely beat anybody, but
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he was a bad player. Is that? I mean,
Yeah.
when you're on like, I don't want to say a bad team because USC is not a bad team, but some of those players are hit or miss at times. Like
Hmm.
their highs are really high. That's why they're able to get like third or second place. But their lows are really low. That's why they're able to lose to like Axis last season. So if they could
Yeah.
be more consistent, find that decent middle ground, I think they could make playoffs. But Artemic's not wowing me at all. I just want them to like throw him on a tank, give Dasher a counter pick champion. Hopefully Keymaker steps up, and they
Yeah,
can win the game through mid and bot lane.
I don't know. I feel that their major issue was generally their bottom lane. I didn't think Arimic was that bad.
He looked fine.
Generally, last season it was like Dasher, Tussle, and Opperman carrying. But a lot of games were sort of solo lost from their bottom lane, just like getting absolutely murdered in team fights,
Yeah.
caught out many times. And I'm not sure how to fix that. I did work with Keymaker before. He's a very nice guy. Like that.
Don't say that.
And
You make it sound really bad when the first things you say is he's a really nice guy.
well,
Because like when you're playing League, you want to know who's good and who's bad. Like, is he mechanically skilled? Is he talkative? But when you say
he
he's
has
a
a
nice
good
guy,
attitude,
yeah, it's like he's a nice
and
guy,
he
but
just needs
he's
to
really bad.
find
Is
the
usually what
right.
people say.
He needs to find the right coaching or the right thing to click for him, and he will be a good player. But right now, his positioning is questionable for team
Hmm.
fighting. That's what
Yeah.
I'll say.
I mean, when I first saw him play, this is a long time ago. He was on like a really bad team called like Apex Gaming. He was he was probably like the best player on that team. Like just picking Lucian, Sivir, hard carrying, and team fights. But I don't see that anymore, which is kind of sad. I really liked Keymaker a lot because he was a really aggressive player and like mechanically skilled. And if you'd give him Lucian, you know he would carry easily. And you'd be like, okay, we'll pick like Lulu just to protect you. He just dashes in, does whatever he wants. But now it's like he plays AP champions in the bot lane for some reason. He,
Malzar and the Heimerdinger,
yeah,
you gotta ban it
Woohoo.
out.
he doesn't look that good on Sivir. Because they had Sivir Yumi bot lane. They still lost that game. They didn't really do much. So I don't know what to say. Hopefully
Yeah.
USG can turn it around. Hopefully it's just like a slump and they'll just come back up top.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, I have a bit of a segue.
Okay.
Because I totally forgot to ask this question at the beginning of the broadcast. So Maple, you're on a team that has a bunch of coaches. Obviously, you just brought in Blank, but you also brought in Pumandu, and they've had Pascal for a little while.
Mm.
One of the things that I was thinking was that kind of sounds like a lot of coaches. That might be too many cooks in the kitchen. So what's that environment like?
Yeah. Well, last season, me and Pascal were doing everything, and when you come to like a wildcard region or a smaller region, you generally like have to juggle like 10 different roles at the same time. So I was doing all of our analytics and also like our scouting, and I was also living in the house doing all of the coaching stuff. And one of our biggest issues was just, I guess, we didn't want to stress Taka too much by forcing him to always translate, but my coaching was like not perfectly effective if it isn't like translated very well. So we got Blank, and Blank wanted or felt more comfortable with like a Korean coach. And when they told me like, "Oh, should we get Pumandu?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, we should." He's like a world champion. Of course we should. He was on Misfits. He was on SKT. He was on
IG was the other big one.
IG. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
IG was, and so he has a lot more experience than me. And as a person, I just want to grow. It's not necessarily about like all the fame or the money. It's just I want to improve my craft every day. So I don't see it as having too many coaches just because like I'm just here to learn, and at the same time I'm maybe doing some of the side jobs and the analytical part I can focus a bit more on, but also I can learn from Pooh, and Pooh has a translator, Karen. He's doing all the Korean to Japanese translation, so it's a lot smoother the learning process for the players, and I think it's just a better setup than last season for us.
Okay.
Alright.
And
Alright.
how's working with Blank so far?
Oh, Blank has good English skills, and he really likes Starbucks, and he's an insane player. I don't want to necessarily give out his playstyle, but he is
Yeah.
really, really good in
Mhm.
scrims.
Yeah, that
He's
makes
a
sense.
very mechanical player. Like there's videos of him playing on stage, and he uses like function keys really fast. So he's always like looking around the map, kind of like what Faker does. So I mean, spectating
mean
that is like
What
pretty-
LS does.
Oh yeah, LS, because he tries to look
he
cool,
invented
right? He wants to be. Oh, look how good I am, but.
that.
I mean, like it's hard to watch though from like a spectator point of view, because I get so disoriented and I feel sick. 'Cause the
Yeah,
screen's always
because your
shaking,
mind
but-
isn't like prepared for the changing of the
Yeah.
scene, whereas the player themselves, who are using the F
Mhm.
keys, are like thinking, "I'm about to look at a different scene." But as a spectator, you're just like,
Yeah, it's
"Whoa!"
just like,
Suddenly
whoa.
the screen changed. Yeah.
Suddenly top lane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. I think Blank will do well. Hopefully someone could get him on Lee Sin, and we can have some fun there. I want to see Blank's Lee Sin again. So I'm just, I'm not saying you should, but I'm just praying that one game we'll see Blank on Lee Sin.
What do you mean, Lee Sin? He's an Alistar jungle main.
But yeah, okay. I think we're
All right,
almost
I
done.
I got a question from Twitter actually from @mad_magical. He does casting for Cloud9, but he was asking, how do you think imports have impacted the LJL? Has it improved the teams, or is it hindering new emerging talent from Japan?
Oh, that's always a really, really good question. It's difficult. Some of the very long-term Korean imports, like, I essentially feel like they're just gonna stay in Japan for their entire career. That most likely they aren't gonna move back to like a Korean team or anything else. So some of them, I don't know if this is wrong to say, but I feel like they're just another Japanese player now, that they speak the language perfectly fine and they've lived here for a long time. And the other imports, they take up spot and they try to carry the hell out of the other Japanese players. And to some extent, it does mean that there's less opportunities for like amateur players and whatnot. But at the same time, I don't know. It's very difficult because if the pro players all played on the Japan server, everyone would have access to their skill level and seeing like how they match up against those players. But right now, everyone plays on the Korean server, so essentially, I guess you could say it just hinders the growth. But at the same time, like it might be something to aspire to, or just to push yourself harder, to work harder. I don't know.
Mhm.
It's a difficult situation.
I mean,
Kevin, any thoughts?
I have a lot to say on this because it's really hard and like it's an interesting topic because you see other regions importing, but other regions are doing fine. Why is Japan like getting hurt a lot by the imports? in my opinion, I think it like hurts them a lot more than it helps them. Like it helps them short term, but hurts them long term. And the way I look at it is that in NA, when you import, like let's say you import Bang, right? Then Bang has to play on NA solo queue. If you queue up for solo queue, you get to play against Bang. You lose to Bang, you get to learn from that. But in Japan, not only do we have the Japanese top pros not playing on Japan server, but you also have the Korean imports that are coming in not play on Japan server. So let's say I was like rank 1 challenger, like, oh, I'm the best player like in Japan. Well, that's not really the case because all the best players are playing in Korea. So what if I go play in LGL and I'm actually the worst player because those top 50 slots or whatever is not available to the public. And I think that's what hurts Japan's growth a lot in the long term because you're not getting to play against Vivid, like Gang, Dasher, and learning and like losing. Like when you lose, you learn a lot, but when you're not playing with them, you're not really losing or learning. So there's a lot of issues that come with importing, and I think it would help Japan a lot in the long term if they just said you can't play on Korean solo queue that much. But I don't think they'll ever do that because short term they want people to like,
Yeah.
improve.
I mean, if all the teams could get together and sign like this pact, which sounds, I don't know, a bit radical, but if all the teams could be like, hey, at this time of day, on these days of the week, we only queue up for Japan solo queue,
Hmm.
and we make it a high level competition. The other thing that I've seen, I think it was Evie, was making little in-house games where people can sign up and communicate to each other. That's a good start to help like aspiring pros train themselves in a team environment.
Hmm.
But besides that, it's very difficult in Japanese solo queue. There often is foreigners playing on the server who aren't speaking Japanese, so there's a lot of issues that sort of hold us back. But at the same time, there are somewhat advantages because you get to play against some Diamond 2 player from Korea playing a challenger in Japan or something like that.
So it sounds like you guys think that the bigger issue is not that the imports are just here to chew up slots. It's the fact that they chew up slots and also don't improve the server.
Yeah, I think
Pretty
like
much.
I think importing coaches is fine to an extent, but like when you import players, not only do you take that away from like a Japanese player, but you're also not giving that much back to the community and to the like server itself, because it's really hard to like grow in LGL. Like well, now that there's franchising, there should be more growth, but you don't see too much growth. I guess this season is a little bit special. You see a lot more rookies, but last season there weren't that many rookies than from what I was expecting. And there's no academy league. There's not really that much for a player that wants to be a pro to really succeed and grow in Japan. So I mean, I don't know what they can do. I mean, I know what they can do, but I don't know if they'll do it. Because once you give like, okay, LGL players can play on Korean server, then they made it so, oh, challenger players can now play on Korean server. If they start to limit, they increase the amount of players that can play on Korean server, but that just limits the amount that can play on Japan server. So I think more activity in Japan, the fact that amateurs can aspire and be like, oh, Dasher's so good. Oh, I just solo killed Dasher in like Japan server. I could be really good. Like that kind of mindset is non-existent. Where in other regions like NA especially, because they're isolated, they can't go on just play on Korean server from NA. They have to play on the NA server, which has its own issues. But when you like beat Bjergsen, you're like, wow, I'm really good. I just beat Bjergsen. Or like, oh, someday Bang, like all these Korean stars, I beat them. I'm better than them. It's my time to shine. Whereas in Japan, it's more like, oh, I just beat random guy. I don't know who he is. Or, oh, like some Korean guy came over. Or Chinese guy is just yelling at me. Oh, okay, I guess this is fun. Whereas, like, I feel like that kind of sucks, not being able to do that.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was just looking at it because I don't see these issues. My Japanese account is like level 10 or something like that. It's I can't even play ranked on it yet. But I was just looking at it because one of the big things is that the Japanese server is still small compared to all the other big servers. And I was looking at what is potentially we obviously it's pretty easy to figure out who the number one Japanese player in every position is. Obviously, you're looking at like Evi, Saros, Yutapone, and then the jungle is it might legitimately be Hachamacha simply because I don't see the challenger scene very much. And then for support, you're probably looking at like Enti, right, as the number one Japanese team of like all Japanese players. But then the question is, what does the number two team look like? Because you see this massive drop off all of a sudden, and I wonder if that's just a product of the server just being small. It just doesn't produce enough players at the professional caliber that it becomes necessarily worth their time to say we want an all Japanese team. The only example of this we've seen in recent years being Axis in Spring, and they won 3 games.
I mean, you have to commit long term. That's the only thing that's the only way you can fix it. You have to be willing to say, "Hey, we want you to grow, not just win." Which is what I thought Axis wanted to do, but they just got 5 players. They only won 3 games, and they were like, "Okay, fuck it, just kick them all out. We'll just get new players now. Bring in the Koreans. Come on in, boys." So I was kind of annoyed at that. If they kept I just want to see a team with like rookies, new names, just like let them grow, let them try to prove themselves, and if they don't grow, then that's fine. But it's kind of weird to like take that chance on these rookies, or I guess one rookie and like 4 veterans, and then immediately just start kicking players out after failing.
Yeah.
So
It's still very early in the scene. I'm not sure if any team has come out with like what their plan is for what they will do in LGL, like their long-term plan.
mm,
And apparently Axis wants to win, so they had to cut the jungle and support, try their best to build a better roster.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Fair enough. We have another question from Rafa NA in Twitch chat. If LJL were to become a major region, what unique playstyles would they have to offer versus other regions? For example, Koreans play more calculated control and slower games, and Chinese play much faster, aggressive skirmish styles.
What would Japan's playstyle be?
Why don't you answer this, Kevin?
I know, but I'm trying to think of a way to so it doesn't sound insulting. Cause cause their playstyle is fairly limited compared to other regions. Like, I mean, not only do you only get to see one team play internationally, so you can't really like when I'm judging like, oh, how's good is Japan against NA? I'm mostly just saying like, oh, how good is Nation against the rest of the worlds? So, like for example, like Crest Gaming's really good play like team fighting, but I don't know how well Crest Gaming would do. They'd probably lose, but that's just like my opinion. I'm just guessing. So I would say Nation's playstyle is very, I guess, Korean light, kind of being controlled, playing out the laning phase, farming, trying to get to mid to late game. I guess like a generic Green Wings, maybe, if you want to compare them to a team. Not as bad, because in Japan, they're mechanically better than every team. Mostly every team in almost every position, so they have an easier time getting to mid to late game fairly easily. But yeah, at Worlds or at MSI, they struggle early game, and I think that is their biggest weakness right now.
Well, as a region, I think Japan has gone through mostly just like a very team fight heavy meta almost every single season. When Gango was on USG, that team was all about team fighting. I think, was it 2 years ago maybe, it was DFM against Rampage or Pentagram, one of the two names, and it went to 5 games, and it was all about like team fighting. So
Yeah.
Japan is a little bit of a slower region, but we have some pretty entertaining team fights, and I think players have more fun here. Like they can show a lot more character. Every single LJO match has like people trying to be a little cute on the screens, whatnot. So I don't want to say it's like not super serious, but a lot of players have fun in this region, and yeah, that's our personality, I guess. Team fights and having fun.
Yeah, I like a lot of the Japan streams. Like, I like the players expressing themselves, looking, doing jokey stuff like Zeros trying to punch Yutafone, or not Yutafone, Yutori Moyashi before the game. That was kind of funny. There's some interesting characters, and I think that's just like icing on the top. But there's a lot of good team fighting teams, and they have unique picks because they're like there's no like rigid structure right now where it's like, oh, we have to follow the meta. Like, they just play. If the players think this is OP, they will play it. Like, Saros just picks whatever he wants. If he thinks Heimerdinger's OP, he'll pick Heimerdinger every game. Like, if Wyvern wants to play Pantheon Talia combo, he's gonna just do that. They're not gonna be like, oh no, but like the Koreans are doing this or the Europeans are doing this. We have to follow that. They're just like, oh, I can do this. Let's do this. Let's go. And either it's really fun or it's really bad. But either way, it's interesting to see these unique picks.
Yeah.
I think just jumping off that a little bit, I think that would probably be the one thing that Japan does a little bit more. Is it is a little bit more willing to just pull out these crazy pocket picks or specific counter picks. I remember back when on-hit Kennen was like the #1 pick in every single region. There was a couple times where both Paz and Evie would pick something specific. I think Paz was playing Pantheon into Oppomen's Kennen, and Evie pulled out something else that was really bizarre in order to specifically counter it. And I think these are just like examples of, yeah, I want to play this, and I'm going to play it. You saw Gario just picking Twisted Fate, something that I don't think any other major region has done this split, but just very willing to go for unusual champions just because they think they're good.
Well, that example for Twisted Fate is
Crown
not
picked
entirely
out
correct.
Twisted Fate.
Because, yeah, it's starting to get popular.
Yeah.
I expected the on-hit Trinity Force Twisted Fate, and then we just got the garbage AP Twisted Fate. I was so bad about that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we're going to criticize these picks if they fail, but I'm kind of happy that they're at least trying out something. I'd rather have a team try something new than just do something that they're not comfortable on, but it's like the meta, and they just like feed. So yeah, I guess that's my thoughts. I don't really know. It's hard to like. There's a very short history, and we've only seen 2 teams from Japan at Worlds so far, whereas like every other region you see like all these different teams, all these different players. Because originally when Japan went to the like International Wildcard Invitationals is what it was called. It was Den Nation and Yutapon and Seros were still there. It's like it's the same players from before. Now they have Evie.
Yeah.
So it's like
I mean,
not
some
much
regions
change.
are just like that. Like, you had Lion Gaming representing Latin America North for like 6 or 7 splits in a row at every single wild card. I don't know.
Oh, okay. This is a super random question. Does anybody know what happened to Remind, the mid laner for USG for like 2-3 years?
Oh yeah. He went
Didn't
to.
he-
Did he go to Turkey and then fail and then went to, the military? I think he quit because he couldn't get on another team.
Interesting. So I see that he played for Sin Gaming and Mammoth for a
Australian
little
team,
while.
Australian team.
Oh, Australian team. Oh
Interesting.
yeah, it was Australian. I remember. Yeah.
I don't know why. I've just like there's just a number of players that have just kind of disappeared from the scene. Rokenya is one. Harechi is another one. Where it's just kind of like
Yeah.
they aren't necessarily like superstar players, but I also just kind of don't know what happened to them. Neo went to Turkey. I know Gongo went to KT Rolster. I mean, almost all of them are imports, but it's just it's kind of interesting to see. Let's see.
I mean, I know a little bit about Rokenya. People didn't really want to pick him up because he had a lot of attitude issues. Even though he played in Japan a lot, he was good. But now that they were like his team got relegated, they didn't have any more trust in him. They decided to go with someone new. He was a very like
Interesting.
egotistical person, from what I've heard. This is like,
Oh, jeez.
Well, like-
you're just killing this guy's career here.
well, he's gone, right? I don't think he's playing anymore.
Yeah, well,
But I
don't know
mean-
what he's doing.
I think if he went to another region, he'd probably play better. I think he got complacent with Japan, got
Mm.
to like didn't have that drive to win after losing for so long. I think
He did
that's kind
play
of broke
every
him out.
single lane in the game,
Yeah,
top, jungle, mid, and
he
support,
was
bottom.
like, "I'll do whatever. It's like just pick me anything." Basically, kind of attitude. A little bit checked
It
out,
was
but a
very
little bit
strange.
frustrated. But yeah, uh,
I
I
remember
actually think
there's been
Japan
a
can
couple
keep
players that
this
have
going.
done that in Japan recently, where they've played every single position. Rafa NA also asks, after moving to Japan from NA, what food do you miss the most, and what's your favorite food that you've discovered in Japan, Maple?
Honestly, almost all the food in Japan is pretty delicious. But in terms of NA food, like I almost never eat just eggs and bacon in the morning anymore, so I miss that a little bit. No sausage, eggs, and bacon. I don't know. I lived mostly in LA when I was on teams in for North American teams. So you would just randomly go Korean barbecue like 2 times a week, and that was delicious. It's here in Japan, but it's more expensive, so I don't usually go. But pretty much everything in Japan is really good. All the beef balls are like exceptional, and they're really cheap. So I'm a man of good value, so I always go. I always give myself a nice beef ball or something like that.
Okay.
There you go. Now
Okay.
that's all the questions that I have coming in from Twitch or Twitter at the moment. If anybody has anything else, go ahead. We'll stick around for another minute or so to see if anybody has anything. But I think
Okay.
we're just about done here. So thank you to everybody who tuned in to the second episode of Recall Japan as we finish up the first week. We have another week of LJL coming up, obviously this weekend. Talked about that a little bit. Any closing thoughts from you guys?
Hashtag Sengoku win. Hashtag SG win. We're against CJ and RJ. So it's a good test for us. Should be
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Mhm. Anything you want to plug, Josh, before we go?
Oh yeah, totally watch tune into Team Liquid Academy broadcast 3 p.m. Pacific, 7 a.m. Japan coming up today or tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow for both of us, I think. Yeah, come
Okay.
check that out at the times listed. Other than that, I think that's all I got.
Maple, anything you want to plug in or say before we head out?
Nah.
Anything you
I
want to
love my
promote?
team. I love Japan. I
Okay.
love money. That's my plug.
Okay. I mean, as for me, I don't know. I'll probably make videos or just chill, stream, and I'll probably watch LGL this Sunday. I'm excited. A lot of these
Ooh.
matches are going to be really close, so I'm actually more excited for this week than I was for last week because of the upsets that also happened.
Yeah, see if
Mhm.
your predictions work out or not.
My predictions are always wrong. I never get anything
Yeah,
right.
Giffen's gonna be like last, probably.
Yeah, probably. I'm gonna get everything wrong. I got half of my predictions wrong last season, so who knows what's gonna happen this season.
Yeah, we
Okay.
could start doing that. We could start tallying for week
But
3.
yeah, have our own little
Yeah.
Twitter thing,
Yeah,
like all
hashtag
the other
superior analyst.
regions.
Okay, we'll make.
Yeah.
I'll make predictions of who's gonna win week 2, and I'll see how right or wrong I am. But okay,
All
I
right,
guess
all
that's
right.
the end of the
Sounds good.
show. Thank you, Maple, for coming on, and bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks for having me.